Hello, everyone. Welcome to another All Blaze No Glory special. Today, we're going to be previewing the AFC West in the NFL. I'm joined with very special guest, Kenney Collins. How are we doing, Kenney?
Very well, Rambo. Yourself?
Good, good. Thanks for coming on at this late hour in the day on a Wednesday. So before we get cracking with NFL, Kenney, why don't you tell us a little bit about your Collins wellness setup?
Okay, so company behind me, which you'll see kind of there, is Collins Wellness and Coaching. Wellness first. So we have clients that are looking to lose weight, maintain weight, gain weight, just generally feel better about themselves, mental health, as well as just general nutrition. The coaching side of it is anything from just general PT work for Joe Blogs Public, as well as sports performance coaching, kind of specialising at the moment in off-ice ice hockey conditioning, working with a couple of players and hoping to broaden out into a couple of teams to junior development programs to allow them to take their progress and performance to the next level.
Cool. Well, thanks for that. I thought it was better you explain it than I try to explain something to do with fitness.
No, that's fine. I appreciate the plug.
So the reason we're on here is obviously to talk about the AFC West and the NFL season coming up. You, for your sins, are a Denver Broncos fan. Why Denver Broncos?
So to be honest, I started off with American sports as an ice hockey fan. I fell into that at about roughly kind of 16, 17, 18 age. I hadn't played before, didn't really know what ice hockey was. Started watching just a local team, the Five Flyers, and thought, well, the NHL is the best league in the world, apparently. So watched the game. The first game I watched was the Colorado Avalanche versus the Detroit Red Wings. Red Wings at that point were in the height of their dominance. So I thought, well, cheer on the underdogs. Flip another 10 years later, it was very much the same story. The NFL was on in the background in the pub. I didn't enjoy it at all. I thought, it's just a rubbish version of rugby, and started watching it. I ended up watching a game in my flat. Was getting a new bed the next day, so I was camping out on the mattress on my floor with my iPad. The game I was watching was Seattle versus Denver, and again Seattle were in their dominance at that point, and thought, well, cheer on the underdogs. Ended up putting two and two together, both Colorado Denver teams. I went, sod it, why not?
Fair enough. That's good.
So it kind of evened up quite well that both the first games that I actually watched live were from the same, state, city. Pair them together and crack on.
Brilliant. So, looking at the AFC West this year, obviously the last few seasons dominated by the Kansas City Chiefs.
Very much so.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on how the AFC West is going to play out? Who do you think is going to come out on top? And do you think there'll be any surprises?
I'm going to go with the non-fan in me at the moment. I can't really see anybody getting really past the Chiefs. We got Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce in your team. You're going to do well. You're going to put up numbers. You're going to make big plays, and stopping that offense is very, very hard to do. Now, obviously, in the Super Bowl last year, the Bucs were able to do that, but they were the only team really to be able to really put Mahomes under pressure last year. When you've got somebody like Mahomes at quarterback, who I don't really see him as a dual threat quarterback, I see him more as a triple threat quarterback. He can nail you down the field with a big pass. He can run. If there's a gap there, he will run. But again, you saw in the Super Bowl last year, if he is under duress, if he is under pressure, he can get himself out. Even if he's not making a play, he can get rid of the ball well enough while running the clock down, or just get out the way and get rid of the ball without taking a sack as much as other quarterbacks would.
That's a fair answer. I think that's probably fair. I think the Chiefs, for me, it's hard to look past them. Certainly in the AFC West, I think the Bills and them probably most people would pencil in for the AFC Championship game, obviously subject to seeding and what have you. But yeah, I think it's hard to look past the Chiefs. Now underneath that, obviously underneath the Chiefs, if we assume that they are going to be the champions in waiting in the AFC West, it's kind of murky to me who would maybe be the next in line for maybe that second or even three playoff spots out of this division.
There's definitely the potential for three. I think if we took, looking at it again from a non-fan point of view and just not looking at data, but looking at the overall picture of each individual team, I think if we look at the Raiders, I don't really see them doing much this year. There's too much murky water, as you said, in the background of it. You've got Derek Carr, who he only threw 9 interceptions last year, which is fantastic, but he's never been that big play guy, I don't think. There's been singular games where he's been lights out, but there's not that consistency of he is going to march you down the field 4 or 5 times in a game and put up numbers. If you're looking at potential for injury on that as well, you've got his backup is Nate Peterman, and yeah, I think the less said about him, the better, if I'm honest, because I mean, I think we all noticed watched the game, I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago, where he came in reserve and threw a stupid amount of picks. Was it 7?
I can't remember. Was that for the? It might have not even been for the Raiders, but
no, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was for. I had it. It's gone completely out of my head who it was, but he came in reserve for a game and he was just awful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if anything happens to Derek Carr, bye season, gone down the toilet, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've got Kenyon Drake coming in this year, who got 10 running touchdowns for Arizona last year, obviously with the dual threat of him and Kyler Murray, which was very good there. But how those two are going to work in the backfield is very much unproven. Henry Ruggs is kind of like your number one receiver there, and he only had 26 receptions last year because of injury. So again, somebody coming back from injury that wasn't great last year through no fault of his own, it just leads to questions. On the flip side of that, though, you got Daniel Carson as a kicker, 94% from the field last year. So if they get into low-scoring games, I think they could steal a couple of them. But as soon as you start talking big, high-scoring games, for example, against what we're going to obviously come on to, the Chargers, the Broncos, and the Chiefs in the division, I just feel they're going to struggle.
Yeah. And then you mentioned both teams there. I mean, the Chargers last year, they found something in Justin Herbert.
Absolutely. What a cracking talent that's going to be.
I was lucky enough to pick him up on the waiver wire for fantasy and got a few wins out on the back of him. And I think I've got a keeper league, so I might keep a hold of him. Before we get on to your Broncos, let's talk Chargers. I mean, they look like they've improved a little bit on both sides of the ball. I think their line's still in question, their offensive line. What do you make of their chances? I think they're the ones, when I'm talking maybe 3 playoff teams, I'm probably looking at Chiefs, Chargers, and maybe Broncos. Is that kind of what you were thinking? And what do you think the Chargers?
I think the other two are a bit of a toss-up. They've both got a lot going for them, but then they do have some questions underneath. Obviously, you got Chargers, that you got Justin Herbert, 31 touchdowns in his rookie season. Wow, that's unreal. Obviously, you've got Chase Daniel as his backup, who he only started 4 games for the Lions last year, and I think, again, the less said about the Lions, the better. But he's been around the league for 13 years. He's going to impart a load of knowledge to Herbert for the long-term plan, but he can also come in as a replacement if Herbert gets injured. There's a potential of stealing a couple of games that other backups might not have. Austin Eckler, 2 years ago, I had him on my fantasy team. Unreal. The amount of points you got from that guy was brilliant, but then last year, again, got hurt, only had 116 carries for 1 touchdown before he got injured.
Yeah.
So whether he can come back from that injury is a big, big question. But then you've got their wide receiving core of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and the rookie John Hurst. I think they could do a lot of damage this year. Keenan Allen been in around the league for 9 seasons now, 8 touchdowns last year. Mike Williams averaged 15.8 yards per reception last year. So they having those guys in reserve, as targets for Justin Herbert, I think is going to be a big, big thing. I don't know how much of the preseason you watched or saw, but John Hurst had an amazing toe tap reception right on the sidelines against the 49ers. It was lovely.
Well, I didn't see all of that, but bits and pieces I've saw been some quite good stuff actually. When a lot of people, it's underrated the preseason. I think it's because it means nothing really, but I
think last year and this year, obviously, because of last year there was very little training camp. It was a time for people to get some reps in. Mm-hmm. And with it being only the 3 games this year and from now on moving forward, I think it's going to let coaches do a bit more. Obviously, there's nothing competitive, on a team-to-team basis, but within, internally, I think there's a lot of different competitions going on, especially this year.
Yeah. And then just finally looking at your Broncos, I mean, what's your thoughts? Teddy now named the starter, which I think, I mean, from my perspective, what I've seen of the two, I think I would have leaned for Teddy, but Teddy, I'm not an NFL coach for a reason. What do you think of the Broncos? I mean, I think a lot of people say they've got a Super Bowl ready roster apart from the QB position. Do you think Teddy's enough to get them into the playoffs?
Playoffs, yes. I think he's got the experience, and from what I saw in the preseason, both starting quarterbacks, because I haven't seen any of the cutbacks today, if there have been any. I kind of been off my phone today, but when I was kind of doing my prep for this, we had still 3 on our roster, and we played all 3 in all 3 preseason games. So you've got Teddy Bridgewater, you've got Drew Lock, and you've got Ripon, or Ripien, or however you want to pronounce it.
No, that's nonsense.
Yeah. So I think the quarterbacks need to go in that order. Drew Lock has been so up and down, and I get why Fangio has tried to give him the time. Twofold, because I think there's a lot of talent there. It's just not been released yet, or he's not been able to harness what he can do without all the noise in the background of trying to get the play right, trying to go through his progressions without panicking. So in terms of the quarterback, definitely, I think Teddy's the right way to go. I think the offensive line has been very good over the preseason for the Broncos. It's been good enough to give the quarterbacks time to go through the progressions. And then when you're going through your progressions to Cortland Sutton, you've got Kendall Hinton, you've got KJ Hintler there. There's a lot of talent and a lot of speed, which means you can do a lot with it. On the back of that, you've got 2 or 3 emerging tight ends. Obviously, you've got Noah Fant that's been there for 2 years now. He had 93 targets last year, but only made 62 receptions. You've got Jerry Jeudy as well as part of the wide receiver core. He didn't have nearly as many receptions as he should have last year, but it's not really come up that much in any of the podcasts or anything that I listened to or read, but from the games that I saw, I have watched Game and 40 for all the Broncos games last year. A lot of the throws were off, so they were targeted, which goes towards their stats, but they weren't able to make the catches because the throws were off, or they were behind them, or they were put into what I would class as a hospital situation. So they're not necessarily thinking about the catch, they're thinking about the contact that's immediately coming and then not giving a good chance to make those catches. With Teddy as quarterback, I think there's going to be more on ball, or the throws are going to be far more on point to allow them to make those catches with time to then try and get some yards after catch as well.
Yeah, I think that makes sense for the Broncos, and I think Teddy Bridgewater was the way to go. I mean, I suppose the biggest criticism with Teddy Bridgewater is he tends not to have the most amount of air yards in amongst various quarterbacks, which is
any podcast you want to quote on that, or
I heard that on the Around the NFL podcast.
I think you might have, yeah.
But
it's a Dan Hanzus shout out.
It is a Dan Hanzus shout out, but it's not from Paul Rudd.
Not from Paul Rudd.
Yeah, but I think Teddy Bridgewater he's more serviceable than Drew Lock has shown that he can be, and that's something that maybe excites me for this division as a whole, because I think this is, whilst this division is the Chiefs to lose in many people's books, I think it's quite loaded, and maybe you never know what the Raiders are going to be like with that stadium now going to be full presumably. In Las Vegas.
I suppose you've got two different stadium questions in the division as well, because you got the Chargers as well.
Well, the Chargers might not have the home field advantage. I mean, when the Chargers are playing the Raiders, I strongly suspect that it will be about 75% Raiders fans, because a lot of LA, I mean, I went to LA on holiday, wore a Rams top, and I can tell you I was probably represented about 50% of the people wearing a Rams top in LA that day. Now, granted, there was no Rams game, but most people were wearing Raiders gear that I saw wearing any kind of NFL gear in LA. So there's still a big team there, and obviously, people from Oakland will travel, and I mean, Raiders fans, let's be honest with you, are nuts. From even just going to the games in London, they are nuts. Nice people. I'm not saying they're bad people, but they're mental. So I think, the Chargers, the stadium question is, can the Chargers have home field advantage this year?
Yeah.
And with the Raiders, it'll be interesting to see how they get on in that packed house, and how that, whether it's a lot of people who are just there to see a football game, or whether there's a lot of mad Raiders fans in LA, in Las Vegas. So that'll be interesting. I think that another interesting question is how Justin Herbert in his second season, you got to remember, he'd done all these great things which were awesome.
You've got a lot of film on that now.
Yeah, a lot of film, but on the back of empty stadiums where he could hear everything that was going on.
Good point.
That's a factor.
I think it could be, because a lot of these young up-and-coming quarterbacks that do special things. So obviously you've got Mahomes. The fans up in Kansas City are loud. But you've got Kyler Murray. You've got how much did say, now obviously it's not necessarily to the because of the fans, but if you look at what the Jets have done with quarterbacks in the past couple of years, how often they've struggled with rookie quarterbacks coming in. Yeah. Daniel Jones, again, it's a New York market, but they've struggled to make that big leap forward. So it is potentially a factor for Herbert. Now the fans will be back in the stadium. There will be noise. He's not going to be able to hear his headset as well. He's not going to be able to call, but also hear his linemen, hear the calls from the line of play, even though he's making most of the decisions.
Yeah.
Whether he can communicate them clearly, and whether the offensive line for the Chargers, there's a lot of, not rookies as such, but a lot of potential inexperience there as well.
Yeah.
So as long as the lines of communication aren't disrupted, I can see him having a fantastic season. If those little eeks start to creep in, how's he then going to adjust on the back of that? Is it just going to be his legs coming through and him just trying to do a Mahomes, trying to do a Kyler Murray, trying to do an Aaron Rodgers, and just go with what the gut feels? Is he going to have that rapport with his wide receivers, his tight ends, and with the line? It's a big question.
Yeah, and of course that LA Stadium question of how much of a home field advantage the Chargers have. I mean, ordinarily when you're at a home game in the NFL, the crowd shuts up when you're on offense.
Yeah,
and
that's exactly the point. Yeah.
Is he ever going to have a quiet crowd in LA? Well, presumably.
I don't think he's ever going to have a quiet crowd in division anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they've got the Texans in their schedules. I can imagine that'll be the only quiet crowd, because I don't think anyone will be going to a Texans game. But but you know, he's gonna. I think that could be an interesting thing for him. So, just looking at around the teams, we talked.
One question I kind of had for you: how much through the wind have you heard of Khalil Mack? Because there was potential rumours of
I did
Gruden
hear
trying to get him back.
The Raiders tried to trade for him and essentially offered the same package back to Chicago to get him back, and Chicago simply said no.
Pretty much laughed in his face.
Yeah, I think I know Chicago are obviously NFC North team, but I think you're going to have to go some to get Khalil Mack from them. And I mean, their defense is just about their strength at the moment. So from the Bears' point of view, with a new rookie quarterback in Justin Fields, who we assume at some point will take over from Andy Dalton, you've got to assume that they want to have a good defense that can give him a chance to play with the ball. Whereas if they're going to give up pieces like Khalil Mack, then it doesn't show a lot of ambition on their part, especially whilst they've still got the funds to keep him. So yeah, I can't see the Raiders do much. I mean, there's not going to be much business done this week.
I think it's very much the same argument for when Khalil Mack left the Raiders. It's very much the same situation for the Bears as it was for the Raiders, because the Raiders had Derek Carr. They didn't have much going forward. The defense was their strong point, and they had a fantastic defense, and you saw how much they've struggled in the past couple of years. Yeah.
And I think Chicago, to their credit, are tried to do something by making trades to get Justin Fields. I can see why they want to hold him back, because he holds on to the ball a bit more than maybe he should. Interestingly, I watched QB1 the second season, so I knew who Justin Fields was. Having watched him, he's that program on Netflix where he was about the high school quarterbacks. So
yeah,
he seems like he's got the attitude to succeed. But I can see kind of why they maybe want to hold him back, and until the season goes, maybe just keep it steady with Dalton.
Yeah, he seems like a good first round pick, but not necessarily a generational quarterback.
Could be the case. I mean, he could prove us wrong. As I say, he seems determined. Incidentally, I mean, I again, there's a reason I'm not a draftnik. There's a reason I'm not a scout. I would have, if I was the Jets, a Jets fan, wanted Justin Fields, because I've seen some of his college tape as well.
Yeah.
But I don't think Chicago are going to be trading Khalil Mack back to them. So I don't know what they're going to do if they really want defensive talent. But we'll see. In terms of the division itself, I mean, who do you think's got the strongest defense? Because these are a lot of offensive teams that we've got here.
In the division, I think there's a lot to be said for the Chiefs. They put up a lot of numbers, but they do get into shootouts quite a bit. I mean, that was proven in the playoffs the past 2 years. And they've still got Tyrann Mathieu, Tony Badger, and Nicole Hardman, DeMarco Robinson. So in terms of their wide receivers, I was reading the wrong part of my notes. They've still got talent there, but it's how much pressure you can put on that with different schemes. The Broncos, I would say, it is not remotely close to the no-fly zone that we had at the end of Manning's career, but there is definite talent there. You've got Kyler Fuller at cornerback, and you've got Kareem Jackson, and a couple of younger guys coming through that are, we'll say, not as good off ball, but once the pass has been thrown, they're very good at tracking back. So, and then obviously, kind of on your pass rush, you've still got Von Miller. He's going into the last season of his contract and was injured for part of last year as well. So him coming back, he looked fantastic in the preseason games for the little that he played. If he can have another breakout year, a potential defensive player of the year candidate there, I think the Broncos could be up there with the strongest defense in the division. That on the back of a moderate to good offense, that's why I would probably pick them slightly above the Chargers. Again, with those Justin Herbert potential communication issues, lack of home field advantage, I'd probably be going, if I was to go 1 to 4 for a prediction, I'd go Chiefs, Broncos, Chargers, Raiders.
Seems fair. Seems very fair. I mean, the Broncos this year, I suppose, had the luxury of they could have had a 15-3-man roster just full of cornerbacks, since they drafted some and already had about 8. There was, of course, a theory that I think it was Dan Hansis or Greg Rosenthal made, that perhaps they picked Patrick Surtain in the hope that they could flip that to get Aaron Rodgers when there was all the disruption over there, which would have been tasty. I'm sure you'd have been a lot higher on the Broncos with that trade.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would. But then, I didn't see much of him in the first 2 games, but he had a very, very strong game in the third preseason game.
Are we talking Patrick Surtain here? Because I'm sure Aaron Rodgers didn't play any of the preseason.
No, I wouldn't expect him to.
Yeah.
No, Surtain, I thought he did very well in those games, and if he can make the roster and continue to show the progress that he has, that could be a very valuable pick in the future. Yeah, I think it could be. It was set. I always watched the first round of the draft. As a Rams fan, I don't really know why, because they never pick anyone in the first round these days. But and yet they have such high draft picks.
But I watched that, and Patrick Surtain, when he was picked, was certainly touted as being, the best cornerback on the board, and someone who's probably the most NFL ready out of everyone. So it'll be interesting to see how the Broncos fare, and if they can. I think if anyone in the division can slow up the Chiefs, it's got to be the Broncos with all their weapons in the cornerback position. But I mean,
if go on.
So I was going to say, I think the Broncos, to me, they've got to be one of those wildcard teams this year, or if they're not one of the wildcard teams, I think Fangio's gone. Yeah, I mean, as we say,
which for me, I'm kind of, I don't know what I want in terms of that. I think I would, if it was my decision, obviously there's the potential of new ownership going in Denver as well. If I was part of that new ownership, I would actually like to keep Fangio, but get rid of all the background staff. And it pains me to say it from a history point of view and things like that, but I don't know how much John Elway is bringing to the table. Now, obviously, he's moved further upstairs. He's saying that he's going more into the background and doesn't want to be, held responsible for these decisions anymore. But he's still got a lot of fingers in that pie. I think he's proven that he's got absolutely no idea what he's talking about with regards to quarterbacks and drafting them.
Yeah, I mean, just because he was one, it doesn't mean he's the best at analysing them. The NFL's moved on since he played. I mean, neither you or I will have ever watched the John Elway game live. And, he's a great quarterback in his day. He's a Hall of Famer. But, other than being good for a sound drop on around the NFL, I'm not sure what he's doing for the Denver Broncos,
No.
I think I see your point there.
I mean, obviously, that's the fan in me talking.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I remember a conversation that I had with, when I was playing hockey, my coaches in Canada. They were Curtis Joseph's coaches. And Curtis Joseph was a phenomenal goalie. He tried to go in with them and coaching, and he just couldn't do it. He wasn't a coach. He didn't have the coach's mentality. So being a player doesn't mean to say that you're going to be a good coach or a good GM or a good... Now, there's been plenty of players that have done it and have done very well at it. The first one that springs to mind for me would be Steve Yzerman. I know it's a different sport, but Joe Sakic. He's done a cracking job in Colorado. But just because you were in and around the sport doesn't mean to say you can do anything else with it.
That's very true. I mean, Wayne Gretzky, arguably, probably not arguably, but one of the best hockey players ever to play the game. And in a lot of people's minds, they called him the Great One. He was the best. Wasn't a great coach when he got the chance. But
Patrick Waugh.
Patrick Waugh's not been a great coach. I mean, Patrick Waugh's a bit mental, though. Let's be honest. So I mean, it's whether or not Elway is the right man for the job. He seems to have been given an honorary role. It's almost like Denver are trying to sort of push him to the background without actually firing him because he's such a legend in Denver.
Yeah.
And they don't want any kind of PR disaster, I suppose. I kind of get where you're coming from, and you're removed from it because you're not from Denver, so it's maybe a bit easier for you to say maybe he's the wrong guy.
And the fact that I wasn't around when he was a legend. He was doing those legendary things for them.
Yeah, exactly.
I've only seen the highlights of the helicopter clip. I've only seen it. I've heard the commentary of it when he went across the line, spiraling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I didn't live that. So for me, there is that detachment of, he was good, great. Meh?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I suppose the argument is there'll be Patriots fans that think, that if they owned a restaurant and Malcolm Butler walked in, he would never have to pay for anything. But he only had one good play, maybe, that we'll ever remember.
Play, though.
It was a very good play. It was a boneheaded call by the coach. Having
said that, I think the documentary after that, and I know it's getting off topic, but the Do Your Job documentary on whatever it was, I watched it on YouTube, of Do Your Job, all led up to that play. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of poetic license in that, but they'd rehearsed that exact play for Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
So, yes, it was an idiotic choice of play call. But for Butler to be able to do that in that second, to go, nope, I'm jumping, that is a damn good play, but it's one play.
Yeah.
Well, going back to it's one play. He's done nothing else since, really.
No.
Yes, obviously there's been plays in games, but nothing you would go to, remember that game down in Kansas City.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have that. Talking of the Patriots, though, Bucks Patriots this year.
Yeah, is that to open this?
I don't know if it's week one,
I think
but
I had
they're definitely playing.
Yeah, I had that in my tastiest games of 2021 season. The Bucks Patriots. I think it's week 3.
Could be. Not studied the schedule.
Brady, and he's
for
returning.
other
He's
teams that
returning
much.
to Foxborough as well. It's not like him.
It's not down in Tampa.
It's not in Tampa, which I think is going to be huge. It's going to be really interesting, and yeah, I think that'll be a real tasty one. I definitely think that's going to be. I'm sorry, everyone that's got Game Pass, but I'm fairly sure that's going to be. Sky, my chair just bounced. I think that's going to be the Sky Sports.
Seeing the headlights there, Rambo. Wow,
that was the exciting bit of the. I think that's going to be the Sky Sports game, surely.
It has to be. It has to be, because there's so many storylines with it as well, and the fact that it's Brady versus Belichick. That's how it's going to be, obviously, put out there. But with the news this week that Cam Newton's now no longer a Patriot, they're going with Mack. Yeah, and as a Broncos fan that's obviously had a bit of a rivalry with the Patriots from the Brady Manning era. Wow. I caught the tail end of that as I started to follow the NFL. It's not that I don't like the Patriots. I really enjoy watching their games, but I like the fact that it's now a new era coming through.
Yeah. Anyway, just before we wrap up, Kenny, because we've I think you've prepped very well for this. You've given us your predictions. If you were to pick a sort of MVP for each team, just quick fire, who would it be? I mean, Kansas City, the choice is fairly limited, but if you want to give us anyone else apart from Patrick Mahomes, you can. But quick fire.
Okay. We'll start with the Chiefs. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes. It's an easy bet. If you want, if you're putting money on it, outside bet, I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire didn't really have the season last year that he wanted, that he was primed to have. So if he can have a bit of a breakout year, there's potential there. Obviously, you've got Kelsey, you've got Hill, you've got Matthews. The list goes on. They've got such a stacked roster. I would probably have to say Daniel Carlson, probably, for the Raiders, just because I think a lot of their points are going to come off the boot this year. So dipping into Dan Hans's kicker club there for a little bit, but there's no eerie techno music in the background. For the Chargers, I can't really see past Justin Herbert. If he builds on anything from last year, I think all the headlines in LA are going to be around him. No offense to yourself, Rambo, I don't really see the Rams doing much this year. So I think a lot of the headlines could be around, in the LA area, could be around Herbert this year. And then for the Broncos, Jerry Jeudy would be the first person that comes to mind. We mentioned a couple of guys are being about potential generational talent. He is phenomenal. And if he can get the service this year from the quarterback, I think he could have a really, really special year. I mean, last year he had his longest reception was 92 yards. I think he could have a couple of them this year because he's very quick going on the deep ball, but it's not just deep ball. He can duck and weave after the catch as well, so he can be quite slippery. So for the four teams, I'd probably go Mahomes, Herbert, Carlson, and Jeudy.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to duck and weave because no one's throwing the ball 92 yards in the air. So
no.
I mean, Jeudy for me, Broncos, Mahomes for the Chiefs, Herbert for the Chargers. I agree on all of that. I think for me, if the Raiders are going to do anything, it has to be Ruggs that's going to be the guy. But I can see where you're coming from with the kicker as well. So thanks, Kenny, for doing this. I think you and I have chatted about maybe doing a kind of quarterly review. How that works in an 18-game season, I have no idea, but we'll work something.
That's fine. We'll work it out.
And we'll do that across the NFL. I don't want to say around the NFL because I just sound like I'm copying
copyright issues.
And we'll have a little chat about things, and and see where we're at, and maybe at the 5-week mark at the start of the season or something like that. We'll get together and have another.
I think bye weeks start around week 6 this year as well, so it might be good. Like after week 5 might be good because then all the teams are playing up until that point as well.
Yeah.
Is there any teams this year that you're like with your division that you're quite excited about seeing?
Well, I'm excited to see how the Jets progress. I have to say they're a team that I kind of have a soft spot for, largely because I listen around the NFL. I think a team that we've talked about the Bills and Chiefs a lot, but I think a team that are going to be knocking on the door, if they can hold it together, are the Browns. I am very excited to watch the Browns this year. I think they've got a great roster. Mayfield's actually the biggest question for me, certainly in that. So I'm curious.
I like the fact that OBJ is now no longer just expected to do it all. There's more around him, so he's not got the pull power to say, chuck me the ball every down. You've got Landry in there. You've got a good running back in there. You've got a couple of potential decent tight ends as well. So if Baker can pull himself away from the commercial camera, then I think there's potential for a good, solid season on the back of last year's certainly driving forward season from what they've had previous. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, they're sort of the teams I'm looking forward to seeing the most. And I will be keeping an eye on the Bears because I'm curious to see how Fields gets on when he actually gets on the field. And no Mitch Trubisky this year, thank God. Yeah, well, he's a Bill now, and put it on the Bears in preseason. So he's behind Josh Allen, so he'll not see a lot of the field unless anything happens to Allen. So yeah, no, I think there's a few exciting teams, but certainly I think the Browns for me out with the Rams and obviously I want to win, but the other teams that we've talked about that are exciting and the big guns. Mm-hmm. I think the Browns could be a team that could sneak into even the Super Bowl if they get a good run. And it does depend. Any of these teams can beat each other. The Browns came so close to beating Kansas City last year in the playoffs, so it'll be interesting to see. So that's who I'm hoping for. Anyone you think that you're excited to see? With my work schedule, I don't get to watch a lot of the games, so I try to keep within in division, at least get through Game Pass, get the game in 40s for the 4 teams in division. I think this year, I'm quite excited to see what the Patriots are doing. I thought last year was just a dead season. I know it's an easy one to go to because there's so many storylines that come out of it, but I think Mac Jones, there's something there that's intriguing. Whether he's good or not, I've got no idea, but there's definite intrigue as to, okay, Cam was a stopgap. He was a stepping stone. And Bill Belichick has had no reservations over that. So I think, is he the next quarterback for the next 4, 5, 6 years with Mac Jones or not? I'll tell you one team I'm not going to watch any unless they're playing division, will be the Giants. I could not care less. I genuinely couldn't. There's nothing that draws me to their game. Yeah, no, I'd love Daniel Jones to do something, but I'm sorry, you've gone from Eli Manning to Eli Manning. Yeah, it's not. They're not. The Giants don't tend to draw me in. I do. I'm curious to see how Washington does this year. And let's be honest, every NFL fan should have a soft spot for Ryan Fitzpatrick for the effort he gives. I mean, and he's just a journeyman. He goes around and there's always something exciting every year with Ryan Fitzpatrick. But no, I'm sorry, I have to stop you there. I hate Ryan Fitzpatrick for one reason and one reason only. What is that? This is all I can grow. This is it.
His beard is magnificent, actually. But yeah, we're getting off topic now, and I better get back to finishing off my my bits and pieces at work, or I'm going to be here for until midnight. So thanks so much, Kenney.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Good, and I'm glad we can do this again in a few weeks' time.
Definitely.
A month and a half or so. And yeah, I've also got lined up Mike Ricchetti to do the NFC East. I've got the Pen from Glasgow to do from the NFC West. If you're a fan of either the North or South teams, get in touch. I've got some people lined up, but whether or not they can do it or not, I don't know. And we'll get somebody for that. Otherwise, it might just be me, which might be a bit boring. But anyway, thanks everyone for listening.
I can do my homework if you need me.
Well, or it might be Kenney again. All right, cheers everyone. Thanks.